Hey everyone, Will Brink here, brinkzone.com. Want to cover a topic that is getting a lot of attention, which is the Oreo cookie versus statin study. We'll talk about that in a minute. I have been getting some questions about what do I think about it. People saying, of course, that they're confused by it. Seeing a lot of conflicting opinions and such about it. I was aware of it because it kind of exploded onto the internet, and obviously a lot of media outlets and stuff grabbed onto it because it's very eye-catching, controversial, clickbait kind of title. So I was aware of it, and I didn't really follow up on it because I knew, however the media and most were presenting it, whatever the results were, however they were presenting it was wildly out of context. That I knew. I didn't have to look at it to know that however they were presenting it was out of context. So I didn't even go read what they were saying about it. I would wait at some point to go and read the actual paper and see what it said, because whenever you see a title like that, Oreo's more effective than statins for lowering cholesterol, blah blah blah, right away something is amiss as far as whether they are representing the results of the paper. So I didn't even bother at that point. Like I said, I knew at some point I'd take a look at it. So two, when something like that happens, when some new sort of clickbait crazy thing pops up that supposedly, totally challenges, the status quo on something, that people hold dear. And of course, cholesterol, saturated fat, LDL, heart disease, all that's a big one. So when that happens, a lot of times, what I will do is see how others are covering it. Because when I do videos or whatever, I'm not looking to reinvent the wheel. I don't tend to cover a topic just because it's a hot topic, necessarily, So a lot of times when something again like that comes up, I'll go see how other people are covering it. And if they're covering it well, or, and do the job, I don't want to do it myself. I'll say, well, it's done well. And I'll often just post their video or an article on my Facebook or something. I mean, if you're, I post a lot of studies and discussions and stuff on my Facebook page. So if you are interested in, stuff that I'm interested in, on sort of real-time, everyday stuff, I would recommend you follow my Facebook page. My personal page, Will Brink, on Facebook, and then there's a Brink Zone page too. As you'd expect, my personal page is studies and all that, plus personal stuff. I do movie reviews, whatever. The Brink Zone page, Facebook page will be just studies and articles. I don't generally put personal stuff. So it depends on what you want. So, but I will, use other people's videos all the time if, that I think that they did a good job and covered a topic so I don't have to do it. Frankly, again, I don't want to reinvent the wheel. I don't tend to cover stuff just automatically because it's a hot topic. So why am I here to talk about this one? So I did look at other people's vids, and then I read the paper. I did it kind of in reverse, but anyway, I did look at it, and then the author of the paper has his own YouTube page, which is good. It's got a good content. I haven't watched all his videos, and such, but the ones that I watched, I think I did sub up to his page, FYI. So his name is Dr. Norwitz. So he wrote the paper we'll talk about in a second, looking at Oreo cookies versus statins. I recommend checking out his YouTube channel. And like I say, I'll put that below this video along with the paper. But I watched other people's videos, a few other people that I generally trust and think they do a good job, and I didn't really find their coverage of it satisfactory. after reading the paper, I felt like there was definitely something I could bring to this topic that I think will be more helpful. I don't really, I just didn't think that everybody, the people that I watched at least, I didn't think they really hit it. I felt like they brushed it off a little too easily, a little too quickly. And I understand. Again, if you're in research and you see, headlines like, Oreo cookies versus statins and that, and you brush over the paper. I mean, it'd be easy. This is a paper that would be, I think, fairly easy to kind of brush over and dismiss sort of out of hand. And I understand that So reason I'm here is I'm going to cover this, I think, in a way that I think will be more helpful to people than what I saw, to be perfectly honest with you. So let's get down to one thing right from the start. I don't, the person that they are talking about, the phenotype that they are talking about in this paper and in general that they're referring to as far as the effect that was found was what they call a lean mass hyperresponder. Now, maybe it's just me, but I think we, whatever, just spent too much time in the gym and all that. But when I saw lean mass hyperresponder, my brain went immediately to assuming this was a person who gained lean mass really easily. A lean mass hyperresponder, right? They just that very rare individual, which do exist, who just could do minimal amount of work or exercise and put on muscle. We hate those people, but they exist. Now, I did a roundtable article on what I call super responders, which would be again a lean mass hyperresponder, with Dr. Antonio, Alan Oregon, and a friend who passed away not that long ago, unfortunately, which I'll put below, which we talk about super responders, which are, again, very rare individuals that, man, these people can just look at weights and gain muscle. So when I heard the term, it was difficult to get past what this term responds to, which is not what you think it is. So I think this is an unfortunate term to use. Again, maybe outside of people that are into working out and bodybuilding and all that, maybe they will not associate the term lean mass hyperresponder with somebody who puts on muscle really easily. Okay, that's not what he means by this. So I found that confusing. I assume other people probably do too. So what is meant by lean mass hyperresponder in this paper or in this context is somebody who is lean, who is metabolically healthy, who has a hyper response to ketogenic diets and LDL cholesterol. So it's a person who is again, this is getting a little funny to me, but we will get into that. This is somebody with a low BMI, technically, right? Which is not necessarily always lean, but we're not going to worry about that. But somebody who is metabolically healthy, i.e., they have healthy lipid profiles, which is defined in the paper, healthy or good insulin sensitivity. They are not obese, and they hyper respond when they go on a ketogenic diet by their LDL going super high. We're talking 300, 400, 500 type numbers for LDL. So they are hyper responders to LDL when they go on a ketogenic diet. I find the term confusing. I think he could have come up with something else. So that's what is meant by this person. So this person is identified in this paper as a phenotype. A phenotype, again, being somebody who is not obese, or at least has a low BMI, has healthy lipids before they start, generally healthy lipids at least, and so forth. So I hope that if you had that confusion, which I did, hopefully that explains to you what the person we're talking about. Now, the next thing you need to understand here is that this study, which is we'll get into it in a second. But it's looking at a very, very narrow human being here. Again, somebody who is already has a low BMI. They're not apparently getting on a ketogenic diet to lose fat per se. They're metabolically healthy. Yet when they go on a ketogenic diet, they have a super response to their LDL cholesterol. In this case, mostly LDL-C is what they looked at. We'll talk about that. So this is a very tiny percent of people that are of the what is referred to as, again, the LMHR phenotype, lean mass hyperresponder phenotype. So you got to keep that in mind where this is going. As you would expect, the unfortunate part about this is that you have, again, a whole lot of people online who probably either didn't read this paper or frankly didn't understand it, quote unquote influencers that are, just gone right off the scale, taking this paper wildly out of context as to what it means or what it does not mean. So what happened? So the study itself, let me bring this in. Maybe it'll help a little bit. Let's see. Okay, so this is the study that was published, where this very specific phenotype. I'm going to stress this because the real question, of course, is how well does this apply to any person is not this particular phenotype who goes on a ketogenic diet. We don't know. And again, credit to Dr. Norwitz. If you read his paper carefully, you will see he sticks very narrowly to what he's the point I think that he's trying to make here. The main point that of this paper that he's trying to make is that saturated fat alone is not responsible for the massive, off the charts LDL response to people that are on a ketogenic diet, and I think to some degree that's well borne out by this study. You have to understand, this study is case study. It's it's just a few people. It's more a proof of concept study. I think it's a very interesting study. I don't think that people that are just dismissing it are doing this study justice. I think the problem mostly is those that are dismissing it are responding to the other people that I mentioned, the quote-unquote influencers and all that are taking the study out of context and making claims from it. Those are the people that they should be dismissing. I don't think they should be dismissing the paper and Dr. Norwitz's conclusions and findings. Again, I will say, the only thing I would say a little bit that Dr. Norwitz is doing something really neat on his YouTube channel, which is sort of taking people along for the ride on this journey in that he is testing out this LMHR phenotype in an attempt to demonstrate that in this very narrow phenotype that again what most people will blame these crazy LDL numbers on is saturated fat, and he is proof of concept attempting to show that that's not true, and I think he does a pretty good job of it. That it has to do with, and the mechanisms as to why this is happening are explained in the paper. It's fairly complicated. It has to do with insulin levels and triglyceride catabolism and so forth. But I think he makes a pretty good case that in this very narrow, I'm going to say this over and over again because people are very resistant. Nobody, no matter how educated people are or what have you, we are all subject to confirmation bias in general. But I think confirmation bias is the most powerful one in human beings. And so if you're somebody who's, has been convinced that saturated fat, is not related to LDL cholesterol, which it is. But anyway, if that's that's where your mindset is at, you're going to grab on and go, aha, he proved this. Or if you're somebody who, doesn't believe in the use of statins or whatever, you're going to, again, aha, this proves statins are garbage. It does not. Okay. So you have to pull yourself back regardless of, where your personal bias is, and look at what he's saying, or look at what the paper demonstrates and stick with that, because it demonstrates, like I say, something very specific. So I think as a proof of concept paper, it's a very interesting paper. I think the value in this paper and in this approach is really just maybe parsing out lipid dynamics, which are more complicated, like everything in the human body, is simply more complex and more nuanced than simple, overly simplified models that were relied on, which have gotten better and better. I mean, again, if you follow the studies and the data and stuff, parsing out these types of things, which are, lipid dynamics, and have gotten more and more fine-tuned. They are gotten better and better. And unfortunately, fortunately, in the last decade, there's been a tremendous amount of data that challenges and or just fine-tunes, further advances our knowledge of lipid dynamics and the things that affect lipids. And of course, why do we care about the things that affect lipids? Well, because we're concerned with how that goes on to impact cardiovascular disease and what am I thinking about? Insulin sensitivity and diabetes and and all that. So this is important work. But I will tell you that there's been so much learned and advanced in the last 10 years that anybody that has not kept up on this is out of date. And again, I see tons of people, including people who should know better. I mean, cardiologists and stuff who should know better, that clearly have not kept up with the data, and they are giving out lipid advice and cardiovascular advice that is about 10 years out of date. If I was to put a number on it, it could be 6 years, it could be whatever, but it's about 10. There's a lot of things that have been learned. So what is the value of this? So I guess I should go a little bit more into the paper, right? At least what he found in people. Okay, well, but what about the Oreos? What about the statins? Sorry. My problem is that my brain gets ahead of my mouth. And so I have to stop, back myself up a little bit, and get back to what we should have been talking about. And we'll get to the value or the lack thereof. Okay. So in this case studies, which, like I said, we're talking just a few people here, to test the model of this phenotype, which is to test and show that it's not just saturated fat in this very specific person that is causing this hyper response in LDL, but actually has to do with insulin and catabolism of some of these VLDL and LDL particles and triglycerides. And so what he did, he was somebody who had been on a ketogenic diet for an extended period of time, had very high LDL, and the model posits that by adding some carbohydrates in, that it will change the lipid dynamic model and would bring the LDL down. So what he did was add 100 grams of carbs from Oreos to test the model, and it was successful. That was 100 grams of carbs from Oreos brought the LDL-C down considerably, and did, again, not just LDL-C, but did change HDL and triglyceride levels and such. And he admits in one of his videos that I watched on the paper that he chose Oreos intentionally to be controversial, which was, probably pretty smart. He wanted to show it was not the quality of the carbohydrate that was having this effect. He says in his video that it could have been bananas or anything else. And so And of course, he did it intentionally to draw attention and get some real attention to this model, and it worked. As you can see, it's gotten a lot of attention. And I think he's absolutely right that if he had used bananas or oatmeal or something, it would not have gotten nearly the attention. So the point of using the Oreos was A, of course, to get attention, and two, to prove without a shadow of a doubt the quality of the carbohydrate was not the point. And so in this very limited, case study, but I think it was very well controlled. It was rigorous to the extent it could be rigorous. Again, with just a few people involved, his cholesterol, LDL-C, did plunge. So then there was a washout period where they went back to their ketogenic diet, and then they added in 20 milligrams of rosuvastatin, which is one of the stronger statins, and the statin did not have nearly as dramatic effect on LDL-C in this, which again, that part probably fairly. I mean, rosuvastatin, any statin, when you've got LDL levels in the the 400s and 500s, it did bring it down considerably, but you're not going to have that dramatic effect where it's going to drop it 200 points or 300 points. So I think that was fairly predictable. Now, if he had done 40 milligrams of rosuvastatin, what would have happened? You probably would have had a further drop. What if he had done 40 milligrams of rosuvastatin with 10 milligrams of acetamide? Probably would have again. Again, you can chase that tail around and around. So where does that bring us? Well, now I guess we'll get back to what I was talking about before as to what is the take home here. I don't see at the moment. There's not a lot of personal choices one can make from this study. I think the value of it again is that it does probably it certainly should lead to larger studies. I think you're going to need, he may get it done. This may spur other labs to, test out this model and see if this model is correct. This lean mass hyperresponder phenotype, who goes on a ketogenic diet, is correct, and I think it is. It probably is. I don't see any particular reason it would not be. But if the person, okay, so you're that person, you're this lean person, leanish or low BMI person. Again, yes, people with low BMI definitely tend to be leaner than people with a higher BMI as a rule. But it's not, it's not one for one. It'd be sort of more interesting, I think, to add in maybe next time actual body fat, body composition testing. I think that would be a little more interesting. Again, there is definitely a relationship between BMI and actual, body composition, but they're certainly not linear and one for one, especially if you're athletic and you work out and all that. Another topic. But okay, so you're that person. You have a low BMI, you are metabolically otherwise healthy, you go on a ketogenic diet, your LDL skyrockets, and now what? Well, you could add in 100 grams of carbs, right, to lower it, if it's a concern to you. Well, now you're not on a ketogenic diet. So is that an option? It's up to you, right? I mean, depends on what you're trying to do. I personally would absolutely be concerned about LDL-C in those levels. Now, that's a somewhat different topic, but this now we're, unfortunately, the debate now breaks off in two directions, right? There's the discussion on how important is those high LDL-C numbers as far as your risk of cardiovascular disease, and then there is another camp. It's hard for me to do this because the camera's reversed. And then there's the going down the rabbit hole of those that, again, I would say more influencers and some docs who should know better, but anyway, saying, oh, that doesn't matter, you're not at risk, don't worry about it. I personally would not be in that camp. The thing, I didn't watch all his videos and stuff, but I don't know, Dr. Norwitz, I don't feel like he addresses that. And my problem is that people are going to take this paper and what he's saying wildly out of context. This paper and the effect that he found applies to a very small group of people for now. So I don't know exactly what value it has in terms of how people can apply it now. The value of it to me, though, again, he's trying to proof of concept a particular model, and I think he's doing a good job of it, and I think it should not be dismissed. I think that there should be more data, and I think we should congratulate him on I think adequately demonstrating that the wild increases, hyper increases in LDL-C in that group is not just simply due to their saturated fat intake. I think he's done a good job of that. Like I say, what I haven't seen from him, and maybe he's done it, but he doesn't do it in this paper and stuff, is how important, or what are the risks and stuff. Should those hyper responders be concerned? I think absolutely they should be concerned, but I think he should definitely follow up on that and be very clear as to where he stands on that position. On that, I don't know. Again, he may have covered it in one of his videos. So if I didn't see it, that's on me. And if anybody wants to, send it over and say, Will, here's the video that he discusses that. So if you're that person, and you want to lower your LDL-C, well, you could add in 100 grams of carbs, but now you're not on a ketogenic diet. So now what? What should you do? The benefit of this research, here's I think where the big potential benefit is that I think what we will find, and I think what this type of research is going to lead us towards, is that we will be able to at some point design nutrition programs towards people's phenotype in mind. I think that there will be really at some point, phenotyping legit. There's already people claiming they're doing it and all that. Don't pay attention to that. There's already scammers out there, pretending they've already got that. You had things like the blood type diet and all that, complete garbage. But there will be a time, and this research leads us to phenotyping people towards the nutrition that may be best for them. And that is really exciting stuff. I think we're not that far away from that, and I think that Dr. Norwitz doing this is really helpful in that, again, it is challenging the overly simple model that in everybody, or in this particular group, that they usually just blamed the crazy high LDL-C numbers in the saturated fat from a ketogenic diet. Now, I'm going to say a couple of things. I really would like to see ApoB as what they're looking at. This is a slightly different conversation. But LDL-C, unless you directly measure it, is an estimate. It's an estimated number. ApoB is apparently the more accurate measure of looking at atherogenic particles. It is a direct measurement of lipoproteins that have ApoB tag on it, and there's a fair amount of data that suggests that ApoB is what you should be testing. They're still testing LDL-C. There is data that there is the two of them are not always one for one, which is to say that LDL-C in some people, again, does not always reflect their ApoB well. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. I say, why not just stop, forget LDL-C and start testing, just test ApoB and be done with it. I don't really know necessarily why they don't do it. As far as I know, almost every major lab can test for ApoB. But there is, if you look at some of the lipidologists and stuff that are, the cutting edge people that are real on it, they really push ApoB over LDL-C. You can measure LDL-C directly versus it as an estimate, as an estimate of total minus HDL to give you, but you might as well at that point just test ApoB. So that's a little bit of sidebar, but again, there is data to show that in some individuals ApoB and LDL-C are not the same, and ApoB is more predictive. So that's one little hang up I'd like to see. He does mention, again, I will say in the paper, the individual that they were testing, there was ApoB tested, and they did find that in that individual they were similar. So again, it is adjusted for, credit due. I just, in general, I'd like to see ApoB over LDLC. What else? I'm trying to think of if there's anything else. So yeah, I think that's mostly it. I hopefully the way I'm approaching this will give you a better idea of what the value is to you right now, which is not much, frankly. I would say again, if I was that person, that very narrow person of the phenotype he's talking about, I would absolutely address those LDLC levels. Now, finally, here's actually one thing does come to me. I think my final response to his paper and also his video, where he is saying that in that phenotype that saturated fat is not responsible for the LDLC numbers. You remember, two things can be true at the same time, which is to say that the model that he posits may be responsible for much of it, and it may also partially be due to some of the saturated fat. Now, the reason that I say that is that, again, talk about case studies or individual testing. There was a keto, low carb, ketogenic cardiologist who was on, I forget his name, but I'll try to find it. But he was on Nutrition Made Simple YouTube channel, which is a very good channel, by the way. And they were talking about this exact thing. Now, he also did some self-experimentation where he tracked his numbers, and I don't know if he was definitely lean, or at least had low BMI. I don't remember if he was a hyper, that is LDL was like astronomically high, but it was higher than he wanted it to be. And he found that by replacing saturated fat with unsaturated fat, his LDL came down quite a bit. Again, I don't recall how high his LDL was. So again, he may not be this specific phenotype, but from a strictly very in a sense similar to what this case study is, he was somebody who was very controlled about his testing and not changing anything and all that. I mean, I would say maybe not as rigorous as this study, but anyway, he did find that by replacing, he's on ketogenic diet, but he did find that by replacing his saturated fat with unsaturated fat and monounsaturates, that his LDL did come down. So I would think that even in this phenotype, that saturated fat has some role in those numbers. Now, again, when your numbers are so high, when you're looking at 400 or 500, LDLC milligrams per DL, and let's say the saturated fat is responsible for 20% of that, you're still way up there. I mean, but I think that another study he could do, let's say he gets a handful of people together or whatever, another study that would be really interesting for him to do would be to parse out what percentage of saturated fat plays in that phenotype versus insulin and the catabolic model that he proposes. That would really be interesting too. So, as usual, the value and the truth of this study and all this falls somewhere in the middle, frankly. I do think some people that I know and I generally like, I think they are overly dismissal of this. Now, one thing, they're very dismissal of this study, also because of how few people are in it, and it's really a case study. But it's very well controlled, and I think all in all, again, the fault is, as usual, is not the study per se. The study right now the problem is absolutely the people that have grabbed onto it. Keto followers, carnivore, followers, anti-statin followers. This has no bearing on the value or lack thereof of a statin at all. Completely different discussion, problem, whatever. Again, in this very specific teeny little phenotype of people, obviously for them, if they want to lower their LDLC, adding in 100 grams of carbs is probably more effective than adding a statin, and now you're not in ketogenic diet anyway. So, what do you want me to say? I would also say, again, I keep having these thoughts, that even with his adding 100 grams of Oreos and what a drop he had, his LDL-C numbers were still not where they should be. They were a hell of a lot better. But again, if you are a believer in the overall lipid model of atherosclerosis and all that, it still was above what you'd want it to be. Now, again, I don't know. He should address that specifically, because his research is being taken out of context and used, again, by some people back in the, LDL-C doesn't matter, it's not related to heart disease, yada, yada, yada. Again, I think he needs to really be solid on this, where he stands on this. If his position was, and I don't think it is, but if his position was, it doesn't matter, well, then I don't agree, and the data doesn't support that ultimately. Doesn't mean, again, in some very, very narrow groups, phenotypes, it may matter less or more. We'd have to look at a whole bunch of other things. But anyway, that's my position on this one. Hopefully I filled in the blanks as to what I think is really going on and what people should know about it. If you want to understand, more, I would read the paper. I mean, if you want to get into the mechanisms or the proposed mechanisms, remember, these mechanisms weren't tested. There's a proposed mechanism, which I think is very compelling, as to why adding in 100 grams of carbs has such a dramatic effect. It is outlined fairly well in the paper, and there are sources in the paper that if one again wants to go, really get into it, they can get into it. So I hope that helps. As always, hit the likes, sub up, and of course, this is brought to you by Alpha Joe. Tastes good, feels good, it's good for you.